What if what we thought we knew about the Great Sphinx of Giza is just the tip of the iceberg? What if some of the most impressive structures of ancient Egypt hold mysteries that science still can't decipher? The Giza Plateau, a monument of wonder, hides secrets that have endured for millennia and challenge our notions of history. The True Age of the Sphinx. A brief research reveals the Sphinx was probably built during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, so we are probably looking at a period between the years 2570 and 2494 BC. But did you notice something about this sentence? Correct, it contains the small but significant little words probably and probably. There is good reason why articles about the Great Sphinx of Giza are relatively vague. We know of no inscription that clearly states exactly when the stone hybrid was created or who commissioned its construction. But this is by no means the only mystery that accompanies the imposing statue. In fact, we also cannot say with absolute certainty why the Sphinx was built in the first place. The most common assumption is that we are dealing with an oversized guardian. But what were the ancient Egyptians really thinking when they created their monument for eternity? Well, the bold answer for the alternative counterpart is as follows. They weren't thinking anything at all, because it wasn't the ancient Egyptians who built the statue at all. This, in turn, is because the Sphinx is actually significantly older than our history books claim. But what is the basis for this, shall we say, confident assumption? Essentially, mainstream critics focus on a set of telltale traces not found on any other structure in the Giza Plateau: the traces of water erosion. In the 1990s, for example, geologist Robert Schoch came to the conclusion that the weathering pattern around the Sphinx could only have been created by prolonged and extensive rainfall. However, this assessment clashes with the common historical view. The last period of significant rainfall ended between the late 4th and the early 3rd millennium before Christ. According to Schoch, this means that the construction of the Sphinx must be dated to the year 5000 BC or earlier. In view of the fact that the orientation of the Sphinx and the following buildings is based on the belt stars of Orion, some others even place the date of origin of the statue between the years 10,000 and 12,000 BC. Those, which can do nothing with its alternative theory, believe that the characteristic traces were caused by other erosion forces. Moreover, the well-known Egyptologist Zahi Hawass insists that the rounded corners could only be explained by the rainfall of the last 4,500 years. But which camp do you belong to? Feel free to write us your opinion on this controversial topic in the comments below. The Lost Builders. Let's just assume at this point that the Sphinx is actually much older than we learned in history class. This fact is naturally accompanied by another exciting question. If the statue was created long before the era of the ancient Egyptians, who built it? Well, the answer to this question can be found in two different sources: in the works of controversial writer Graham Hancock and in the legendary Hall of Records. Thus, Hancock is rock-solidly convinced that humanity is a species suffering from collective amnesia. In concrete terms, this means that long before our time, there existed a highly developed civilization that was wiped out by a devastating natural disaster at the end of the last ice age. However, a few people managed to survive the apocalypse and to spread their advanced knowledge to the world afterwards. In this regard, Hancock points out that many ancient peoples knew one and the same story at its core: the story of a great flood that plunged the world into darkness. Subsequently, higher godlike beings rose from the chaos and brought the gift of civilization to the simpler peoples. However, aside from the strange coincidence of many cultures reporting the same incident without ever having met, tangible archaeological evidence would exist to support this thesis. To understand where the hoard of hidden knowledge is located, we have to go back to the Sphinx. In the course of time, several entrances to the structure have been discovered. Officially, however, the corresponding shafts lead to dead ends. However, the situation is somewhat different in the case of the hidden entrance that slumbers before the paws of the Sphinx, provided that it really exists, of course. In detail, this tunnel should lead directly to the legendary Hall of Record, an ancient library that tells of the existence of the lost precursor culture and overturns our entire historiography. But unfortunately, this exciting story comes with a big catch. No such thing as the Hall of Records could ever be found. Some time ago, an American research team penetrated deep into the rock in front of the paws of the Sphinx, but without uncovering a secret tunnel. And yet, at the same time, the seismic measurements revealed that deep under the Sphinx actually exists unknown chambers. However, these are supposed to be only natural cavities, but they have not been investigated in detail so far. This is due to the fact that the Egyptian antiquity authorities put a stop to all further investigations officially in order to protect the ancient statue from damage. The lost technologies. Isn't it amazing that we still don't know how the ancient Egyptians built their colossal pyramids? Sure, there are numerous theories about this, based primarily on the use of sophisticated ramp systems and pure muscle power. However, in the absence of clear evidence, some people consider it conceivable that the pharaoh's empire dwellers were in possession of futuristic technologies that go beyond the limits of our modern imagination. Know whether it is the core drillings in Abusir or the so-called light bulbs of Dendera. Those who believe in the corresponding theory still find many indications of its correctness today. But what is it about the often cited lost technologies? How did they work in detail? When Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock were once guests on Joe Rogan's podcast, they stated that those very technologies probably worked quite differently than ours. In detail, we would be dealing with devices based on implosions and the power of sound. That sound waves are indeed capable of manipulating matter is well known, and indeed, ancient Egyptian texts tell of priests singing while pyramid blocks weighing tons were heaved aloft. The question of purpose. Mystical funerary texts, magnificent burial objects, and of course, ancient mummies. These are all the things that, until now, were not supposed to be found in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Since the appearance of the structure is so clearly different from the other tombs of ancient Egypt, some people express great doubts about its classification as an oversized pharaonic tomb. Let's just assume that the doubts are justified. Then what could the pyramids be about? Biblical granaries, as the US politician Ben Carson claims? Advanced power plants or gigantic light sources? Let's have a closer look at the latter theory, which seems to be unbelievable at the first moment. Well, in principle, light can be produced by any system if it can emit charged particles into the ionosphere. So what would have been necessary for the Great Pyramid of Giza to shine like a prancing aura in the ancient Egyptian nights? First, there would be the material. And lo and behold, an analysis by the National Research Center in Cairo found that the conductivity of the limestone used improves at higher frequencies, to a point where it is extraordinary. If a material's conductivity needs to be around 600 terahertz and it also needs to be structurally strong, there can be no better choice than limestone. Moreover, we should recall a remarkable fact at this point. The Great Pyramid is located at the geographic center of the Earth. A happy coincidence or a deliberate choice of location? Whatever the case, for a structure to emit high-frequency radiation, it must be surrounded by a large landmass. And if the pyramid was to emit electromagnetic radiation on the scale of the entire planet, its location in the middle of the maximum landmass was ideal. The electrons emitted by the pyramid had to reach the ionosphere and thus travel a distance of about 100 kilometers. Basically, we can think of the Earth as a spherical capacitor. The electrons with high frequency would thus propagate through the air with low resistance. But to complete the circle, they would eventually have to return to the base of the pyramid. Approaching the Giza Plateau, the electrons would flow through water-filled caves. And as fate would have it, the discovery of those very caves was confirmed by Andrew Collins and Zahi Hawass. There, according to the theory, another process called electrolysis took place. In simple words, it means nothing more than the water molecules split into hydrogen and oxygen gas. The gas mixture that now filled the caves increased the air pressure in the rocky underground. This was so strong that it was accompanied by a booming noise and made the earth tremble. And it is quite interesting that in the pyramid text, several times the speech is about vibration and trebling. And also the internal structure played an overriding role in the presumed generation of light. So the chambers, shafts, and corridors were important cogs of a coherent system. For example, let's take a look at the so-called Queen's Chamber. When the air pressure in the underground chamber rose, the hydrogen gas here came under pressure and filled the southern and northern shafts. Since these shafts are sealed by the mysterious Grottenbrink doors, the gas could not escape. As the temperature increased, a partial release of the electrons occurred. The copper clamps in the doors again served the purpose of conducting the electromagnetic radiation from the stars into the system. Then the ionization of the hydrogen took place. Now it was up to the king's chamber to collect the free electrons and direct them to the top of the pyramid. This was done with the help of the granite beams that were installed there. The ceiling beams, which weigh about 40 tons, were specially brought from Aswan, an area about 800 kilometers from the Giza Plateau. The object, commonly interpreted as a sarcophagus, was actually intended to generate a high voltage to ionize the hydrogen and make the room conductive. Okay, admit it. The theory that the Great Pyramid's function was to release free electrons into the ionosphere to generate light probably has at least as many critics as proponents. But isn't the idea that the stone colossus once shone with a billowing light somehow magical? If you love videos like this, hit the subscribe button. The biggest highlights are yet to come.